welcome back to the Gamerpreneur podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bradford Carlton. Today, we are talking about dealing with criticism. And, criticism is one of those things that I think people misunderstand the word and the meaning behind the word. Because when we think criticism, most likely you may be thinking about your parents or your boss or maybe a nagging spouse or significant other of whatever. And this person sees something that you're doing and they tell you you're doing it wrong, right? And it doesn't feel good to be told we're doing something wrong. In fact, it's one of those like psychological things that causes people to crack most. Like people want to be right, and in their own minds, they will find whatever way they can justify it to be right. So when someone tells you they're wrong, like it creates dissonance in your head, and you're willing to blame that person instead of being self-reflective, and it's this interesting psychological phenomenon. With all that said, though, just because someone is telling you something that makes you feel that you're wrong doesn't mean that they are wrong. And that's the power of criticism. And there's positive criticism and there's negative criticism, right? So, going back real quick, you got your parents who would nag at you. You got your significant other who nags at you. You got a boss who nags at you. And they tell you you're doing it wrong, or you should have done it this way, or blah, blah, right? You know what I'm talking about. That kind of, and they with the sneer in their voice and that look on their face of like, I know better than you. That is the wrong way to present criticism, okay? That may not be constructive criticism. It may be deconstructive criticism, because it may just completely knock you off the path. You may be going along thinking you're like doing something, and someone tells you you're wrong, you're terrible at this, you should give up. Like that's bad, right? Because there's not really a thing on this planet that you may not be able to do. Like barring like physical issues or mental capacity, whatever. Pretty much everybody's the same. Like we all are born and raised as human beings. We all have more or less the same physical capabilities, more or less the same intellectual capabilities. There is a range of IQs, sure, but there are plenty of people who with low IQs who make millions of dollars. So what's your excuse? With that said, if someone comes along and, I used to be told that I didn't have an artistic bone in my body. And so I remember being a kid and I would draw, and I knew my drawings weren't the best. I didn't care, right? I was just a kid drawing, and I would make comics and I would draw stuff. And I remember being told, you don't have an artistic bone in your body. Your stuff sucks. And something happened to me that I adopted that as kind of a mantra I said about myself. So I went through middle school and I took art classes. I went through high school and I took art classes. I constantly told myself I don't have an artistic bone in my body. In fact, when I first started picking up Photoshop and I started designing stuff, I'd look at the stuff I'd make. I'm like, man, this sucks. I don't have an artistic bone in my body. I'd repeat it over and over and over again. That's bad criticism, right? Because that's something that took me off of a path that if I had spent more time to practice and develop, I could have turned into something that, who knows, I may not be doing the Gamerpreneur. I might have been an artist, right? On the flip side, you got constructive criticism. This is the kind of criticism that is more geared toward making you better, okay? And it may not feel that way in the moment. So, and it comes down to the kind of the language people use, and we're not trained to give criticism. This isn't something that I've ever had a class on, right? I went through 20 years of school, something like that. Maybe 18, 19 years of school, some large number of years of school. And I never had one class that taught me how to criticize someone constructively. Instead, I was raised by my mom and dad who would criticize me. I had teachers who would criticize me. I had bosses who criticized me. And I got out into the real world, and now I had employees of my own, and I had to figure out how to criticize what they were doing. Again, criticism not being a bad word inherently. Okay. Set that aside. Like, criticism is not necessarily a bad thing. The way we approach it, the way we give that criticism can be bad. Criticism itself is meant to help develop us. It's meant to help us grow. And so when you are giving somebody criticism, if you are doing it deconstructively, it's going to take that person down. It's going to bring them down, knock them down a few pegs, whatever, right? But if you do it constructively, it should help them get to above where they're at, help them get to the next plateau and keep growing in whatever endeavor they're attempting. So you really want to be mindful of the language that you use when you're giving criticism. Okay. Because and everybody's different. You never know what one person's going to consider like horrible criticism compared to someone who thinks it's constructive criticism. I mean, I've worked with guys I could like just yell at. And at the end of this like shouting match, he goes, "Good talk. I think I got something good out of this." Like, what? And I've had others that I would say, this really could be a little bit better. And I'm giving my best. I'm trying my best. And they would just freak out. And so you have to, it's not just necessarily the words you say, it's also a little bit of understanding the psychology behind the person you're talking to, and yourself too. Like, how do you handle criticism? What are your triggers that you instantly think someone is coming at you or they're yelling at me? They're probably not yelling at you. Maybe they're raising their voice a little bit. Doesn't mean they're yelling, right? But you really got to nail this down, because criticism is big. If you do not have someone who is criticizing your work, if you are just creating and building and selling and making your business grow, but no one is telling you what you could be doing to improve, you will eventually hit a wall in your business. It's going to collapse. All right. So whether that's your customers or a mentor or your employees or a co-owner or what have you, you need to have someone who's able to have kind of somewhat of an objective view or even a biased view from their opinion, their perspective of what you're doing wrong, because that point that they're making could be a whole new avenue of income for you. It could multiply your income. It could avoid losses. It could retain customers better. You never know where criticism is going to take you. It was Napoleon Hill, I think he said in The Law of Success in 15, 16, 17, whatever. He had a bunch of different versions of the law of success. But he said that whenever someone's criticizing him, he throws himself on the side of his attackers, because the people who are slinging insults and telling him what he's doing wrong are the ones who truly have his best interest at heart, because they're willing to tell him the truth. Your friends who are like, "Oh no, everything looks great. Yeah, no, this is fantastic." It may not be. Like, I was just on a call this morning and had an artist designing stuff, and we had to tell him, like, this stuff is not good, man. Like, and every person in that room is like, this is not good. You need to come back with something better. But if we had "Oh, okay, yeah, no, this is art, we understand," and taken it to the client would have been like, "This sucks, give me my money back." So you understand, someone criticizing you is not necessarily out to hurt you. It may sometimes feel that way. It could be that they see your work as a reflection of them as they're criticizing you, and they just want you to grow to be able to improve what they are working on. Okay. And too many people get upset. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen. There are definitely bosses out there who are out to get you. Okay. I've had bosses just like that. They were literally out to get the employees in the business because of one small screw. It may not have even been the employee's fault. I've seen it happen. Okay. By and large, that's not necessarily the case. It could just be constructive criticism disguised as deconstructive criticism. Maybe they weren't taught how to criticize somebody properly. Maybe they didn't know that the way they said it didn't resonate with you properly. That's why there's leadership classes and leadership development. And, people who start businesses don't necessarily have MBAs. Most people who start businesses were actually veterans, people who went into the Army, Navy, Air Force. I don't want to say just Army, but into the armed forces. And they got out and they're like, "Man, I don't think I can work for anybody because the civilian sector sucks. So I'm going to go to business myself." And okay, well, they didn't have any business training. They're all figuring it out themselves. And they kind of expect you to do some of that kind of legwork yourself as well, because that was the culture they were raised in. And so you really have to understand perspective. It's one of those things that can make or break you as a business owner or even as an employee. Perspective. Your perspective is not the only perspective out there. There's always two perspectives. I'm thinking of this meme or cartoon that I saw years ago where there's a guy over here and he's looking at the ground where there's a big 6 written on the ground. So he says, "It's a 6. But on the other side of this number is another person staring this way going, "Oh no, it's a 9. Aren't they both right?" they're both right? Because like based on perspective. And so we have to understand that sometimes our perspective is not necessarily the right one. And if you can accept that in yourself, you will be able to grow and develop as a person. So on that note, I'm going to remind you all, organization is the enemy of sloth. Understand that if someone criticizes you about something, don't just take it as an ego attack. Take it as an opportunity to learn and grow. Because if you can take that as an opportunity to learn and grow, and you do your research and you figure out how to do it better or do it right, you're now going to be ahead of everybody else who's presently doing it wrong. And if every single time you got criticized about something and you kept growing every single time, before you know it, you'll be an expert in whatever field you want to be in. And that's just how it goes. The more failures you have, the more opportunities for growth you have, the quicker you grow. So that's what I got for you all today. Don't be just a gamer, be a gamerpreneur.